Hello, everyone. I am shocked at the positive response that this little channel is getting. And astoundingly, today I get to speak with philosopher Michael Huemer, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Dr. Huemer, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, you're a professor at CU Boulder. You were the
Yes.
plenary speaker at the joint math meeting for the Philosophy of Mathematics group. Is there anything about your history you'd like to share?
I don't know, not especially. So I'm a professor of philosophy at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I went to Rutgers University for a PhD in philosophy, and I've written a lot of books and articles, including this book about the infinite, approaching infinity.
Am I correct in saying the last person to come up with a satisfying definition for infinity was Aristotle?
I don't know if he has a definition for infinity per se.
Okay.
I don't know if it's satisfying exactly. So, like, if you actually wanted a definition of infinity, like, there are different things that people say, right? Sometimes they say an infinite set is a set that could be mapped one-to-one onto a proper subset of itself, right? Which I don't think is a great definition, okay? I think that's a property that infinite sets have, but I don't think that really explains the concept. But the problem, that isn't really the problem about the infinite. Like, it's not that we don't know how to define it, right? So there are different views about how you should define it, right? I sort of characterize it as when you say something's infinite, you're saying that it exceeds any assigned determinate quantity. So if you say there's an infinite set, what you're saying is something like, take any natural number, you can find a subset that contains at least that many elements, that sort of thing. Aristotle was, so like the problem is really about, there are a bunch of paradoxes that arise with the infinite. And a bunch of these paradoxes you kind of want to resolve by saying that it involves an impossible form of infinity. But you don't want to say that infinite things are in general impossible, right? Like, what we want to say is some kinds of infinite things are impossible and some of them are possible. And Aristotle had an interesting an interesting view about this, which I think is not correct, but it has important insight in it, right? His view was that you can't have a, quote, actual infinity. You can only have a potential infinity, right? So it's something like, there can be something for which there's no limit to it. There's no limit to its potential. Like, you can walk around the block any number of times that you want. Like, maybe there's no limit to it, but however often you do it, it's going to be some definite number.
Mm-hmm.
So the actual infinity would be if you say, yeah, I just walked around the block infinitely many times. The potential infinity would be if you say, there's no limit to how many times I could do it, right?
I see. So let me try to paraphrase in my own words what I think you just said. In your book, you tried to come up with a set of conditions under which an infinity is a valid concept. And if it doesn't meet those set of conditions, then you reject the concept as invalid.
I mean, sort of. Like, I'm not completely clear what it means for it to be invalid, right?
Okay. What would you say you've done with your book? What is the purpose of approaching infinity?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out when something can be infinite and when it can't. Like, what kinds of infinity are possible and what kinds are not.
Oh, sorry. So instead of valid and invalid, I should have said an infinity that is possible and an infinity that is not.
Right, yeah.
But possible doesn't mean physically realizable to you, does it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, I mean, it depends on what we're talking about, right? Like, if we're talking about a mathematical object, then it doesn't have to be physical, right? But, there are a bunch of these paradoxes of the infinite that involve, well, what would be physical processes, but they might be impossible. But, so like there's Zeno's paradox,
Mm-hmm.
which is supposed to show that motion is impossible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there it looks like you have an infinity that's in real physical processes, like
Mm-hmm.
things actually move, and it looks like there's infinity kind of involved in any process of movement. Right, so like part of my question is, okay, and why is that possible, but other kinds of infinitude are not possible? It is possible to have the motion that has infinitely many parts.
Is there a simple example of an infinity that is not possible?
Yeah, I mean, they might be controversial, but you get these paradoxes with some of these scenarios. So, okay, so here's one that you probably haven't, or maybe you've heard, but most people haven't heard. There's like Benedetti's paradox. There are various variations on this, okay? But so here's one version. There's this pile of slabs of stone, and assume all of the stones are opaque. And on the bottom, there's a half-inch thick slab that's completely opaque. And let's say it's black. And then on top of that, there's a quarter-inch slab that's white and is completely opaque. And then on top of that, an eighth-inch slab. Okay, you get the idea? So within 1 inch, there's an infinite number of these slabs. And suppose that you stand over it and look down. What do you see?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see black or white or gray or something? And part of the puzzle is, okay, so clearly you can't see through the stack. You can't like see what's underneath it.
Right.
But you can't see, like, there's no particular slab that you're seeing. So you don't see what's under it, but you don't see any of the slabs either, because for any of the slabs, it's occluded by one on top of it, right? So it's like, then you wonder what happens. And then, so like, the most obvious tempting response to this is to say that this is an impossible scenario.
Uh-huh.
Like there could not be such a pile of slabs.
Right. Is that actually controversial? Are there people who believe that this is a valid or a possible infinity?
Well, nobody thinks that you can feasibly create that pile of stones.
Right.
Like, really? But I think many philosophers would say, well, it's, there's no contradiction in it, so it's metaphysically possible. Right?
I see.
We don't actually in this world have a way of doing it, but like you could imagine a coherent world in which you could do that, and then you have some kind of paradox. I mean, by the way, like, so, like my issue isn't, it's not about physics per se, but there are interesting issues, in physics. So like, in physics, there are some kinds of infinitude that are considered to be problematic. So like the singularities, like in a black hole or at the time of the Big Bang, it's considered to be a problem that you get infinite quantities, like you get infinite space-time curvature, right? But the infinitude involved in like the infinite divisibility of space, like just the fact that when a thing moves from point A to point B, it crosses infinitely many points, or that distance could be divided in half infinitely many times, like that's not considered problematic.
Right.
So why is the thing about all the infinitudes in the black hole, why is that a problem? But the infinitude of space being infinitely divisible is not a problem. So like, that's one of the things that I was thinking about when I started writing this.
There are mathematical concepts of infinity. There are many of them. One-point compactification, homogeneous coordinates, the line at infinity, the augmented real numbers. Does your sense of what's possible consider these sorts of definitions?
Well, so my theory bears on these mathematical infinities, right? So like, there are all of these infinite sets or sets of infinite cardinality, right? Also, like there are theories like the hyperreals, which include infinite numbers and infinitesimal numbers, right? So like I have views on that. Like, do those things exist? And are those legitimate numbers, right? But basically my view about the infinite sets is, so if sets exist at all, then of course there are sets of infinite cardinality. However, I don't think that those are numbers in the same sense that the natural numbers are numbers, right? Like, so there's like the sets with Aleph null cardinality, but I don't think that that's a number in the way that 4 is a number. About the hyperreal numbers, I think those are fake numbers, basically.
And what does it mean to be, like you said just a second ago, if sets exist, then there are infinite sets. How does one question the existence of a set? If I say the natural numbers are a set, how does one question that?
Yeah, so, and I mean, there's a point where I question whether sets exist. I'm not convinced that they really exist. But yeah, what does that mean? So it doesn't mean that maybe there aren't any natural numbers. There are natural numbers, but there's a question of whether the set of natural numbers exists. And why would somebody question that? I mean, so some philosophers question it because they just like denying the existence of anything that they can deny the existence of. Right? They're like, do we really have to say that it exists? But that's not really my thing. My thing is, I feel like nobody can tell me what these things are. Nobody's giving me a satisfactory explanation. And I don't feel like I know what the evidence is that they exist, right?
So if I tell you, you know, the empty set, then the set containing the empty set, then the set containing the empty set.
Yeah.
These are sort of like isomorphic to the natural numbers. These are, in a sense, the way the natural numbers are defined. And to you, this is what? Like, what do you think about the statement I just made?
Somebody needs to tell me what the empty set is. What is that? Now, when set theory is first introduced to you, people say something like, so yeah, sets are collections.
Yeah, right, which is just another word for a set.
So, I mean, I kind of understand that, like the ordinary English sense of collection, but then what's the empty set? That's the collection that you have when you don't have anything? What's that? Like, if you don't have anything, you don't have a collection. So what are you talking about? And then there's like the set containing the empty set. That's like a different collection that you also have when you don't have anything. No, it's the collection that contains this first collection that doesn't contain it. I don't know why I should believe there is such a thing, right?
Okay, I'd like to shift gears in the conversation for just a minute. So you think about very deep subjects and you question, you know, existence of very esoteric quantities. What is normal life like when you're going from thoughts like that to going to the store to pick up milk?
You know, it's pretty much like everybody else's life. Like,
okay.
You know, like being skeptical about sets doesn't really affect your daily life. You don't go like, because sets don't really do anything in normal life, right? Like, you know, I mean, if you believe in sets, maybe you could say, I'm gonna have a set of milk cartons at the end of the day. But if you don't believe in them, you just say, I'm gonna have some milk cartons. Okay. You know, I mean, I guess like there is the effect that you know, just like spend more time thinking and less time blabbing about concrete objects, right? And so, you know, and that's good because, you know, it's interesting and fun.
What are you thinking about now?
Well, right
not now at this very moment, but what are you working on now?
You know, I work on a lot of different things. So like now I have a project about legal ethics and about the kind of failures of the justice system, right? So I have the idea that our justice system is, it's not doing a great job of pursuing justice, and that's largely because nobody in it is pursuing justice, right? And my view is that should be like, if you're a participant in the system, if you're like a judge, a lawyer, a jury member or something, the first thing that you should be doing is pursuing justice. Okay, and if you think that sounds trivial, it's not, because most people think that that's not what they're supposed to do. Okay, like the judges think that what they're supposed to do is just uphold the law, whether or not the law is just. And they tell the jury members that what the jury members are supposed to do is just evaluate the factual evidence. They're not, allegedly, they're not supposed to evaluate justice, right? And then the lawyers think that they're just trying to serve their client's interests. The prosecutors actually are supposed to care about justice, but they don't, right? They're just trying to win. They just want to rack up as many wins as possible. So, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes wrong because nobody cares about justice.
My brother's a lawyer. and I have worked as a legal expert in the legal system.
Yeah.
When I participated in it, or when I participate in it, I definitely feel like I'm attempting a righteous pursuit of justice.
Yeah.
I'm very well aware that my brother feels the same way.
Yeah.
So there are at least two examples of people who feel, right? We feel like we are trying to pursue justice.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you should feel that because you should be doing that. And, you know, I mean, it depends upon what exactly you're doing. There could be they're like these public interest law firms, which are actually, you know, just ideologically driven. And I mean that in a good way, like they're driven to pursue what they view as the just and the right and so on, right? But I mean, I don't think that's the majority case. I think the majority case is you think you're just supposed to do what is in the interests of your client, right? Whether your client is right or wrong, right? So like if you're you know, representing a plaintiff in a lawsuit, you're not supposed to think, yeah, but is he right? You're just supposed to think, I'm going to try and get him as much money as I can.
Are you familiar with the concept of jury nullification?
Yeah, indeed.
Okay. And
Yeah,
so th this is what you're talking about, right? Like it seems like you are a proponent of jury nullification.
that's right. Yeah. So like if the law is unjust, then the jury should refuse to convict, right? That's my view. And that's because their first loyalty should be to justice, not the law. And why is that? Because I mean, this seems to me like this should be obvious, but not everyone is accepting this. The purpose of the law is justice. That's the purpose. Like, it's not just an end in itself. It's not like, oh, let's just have some rules and just have people following the rules. The reason we have that is that it's supposed to try to achieve justice. It's irrational to place a means ahead of the end that it's a means to. So like if there's a conflict between your chosen means and the goal that it's a means to, you have to prefer the goal, right?
The sort of counter argument to jury nullification is any internal biases of the jury members play a much larger role. As for they're no longer the finder of facts, they are now the finder of facts and the evaluators of the law. And do you have a statement regarding that?
Yeah, and so what? What's wrong with that? Okay, so yeah, you might think, oh, well, what if the jury is biased? Okay, wait. If you're biased, you should try to correct your biases. Okay, but if you're not biased, the fact that other people are biased is irrelevant, right? Like if you're on a jury and you're deciding whether to convict or acquit, the fact that some other juries out there would be biased and would make incorrect decisions is irrelevant. You just have to make the correct decision in this case, right? And so anyway, you know, and is it true that the jury is biased? I don't know, but are they more biased than the politicians? Because like the alternatives are not, oh, let's have perfect justice like given by God versus let's have the judgments of humans. No, the choice can only be different humans. Because like there might be a God, but he's not going to come down and tell us. So we can only rely on the judgments of humans, all right? So what's better, like the judgments of the ordinary people who are in the jury room and they heard the case, or the judgments of the politicians? Well, I mean, it's open to debate if you just look at it like that, but remember that the politicians haven't heard the case, right? Like there's people in the jury room, they heard the facts about this specific case. The politicians didn't. They just made some general rule. And even if it's good in general, it might not be good in this particular case. It's not even clear that they're good at making general rules, by the way, though, right? And it's not even clear that they're even trying to make just rules, right? Like the politicians are trying to do the stuff that's going to get them reelected, and you know, also like keep the special interest groups that are paying the money happy, right? Like that's what they're trying to do. They're not thinking very hard about what is just or unjust.
Dr. Huemer, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you today.
Yep, it's fun.